Thank you for coming. Unfortunately, Senator Murphy, Congresswoman DeLauro, Congresswoman Hayes, Congressman Courtney, and Congressman Hines could not make it here today, but we know they stand with us and they are fighting to save lives as they do their work in Washington, D.C. This morning, we are sad and heartbroken for the families in El Paso, Dayton, and Gilroy. We mourn for all the innocent lives lost senselessly to gun violence. We know we can do better, and we know that there is much we can do to stop these mass shootings and stop the gun violence that scars our neighborhoods and our communities. We have leaders in our state and our country who empower hate, who vilify people from Mexico, Central and South America, the Middle East, and other places. And we have leaders who, by their silence, condone this bloodshed. Stopping hate takes leadership from the highest levels of our national government and our state government. And let me say that the silence on the other side is deafening. We have invited leaders in our state from both sides of the aisle, so take a look and take note who is here and who is not. And remember that your voice is your vote, and we are having the opportunity to express our policy preferences in September and November. Gun violence is a plague in our state and in our country. We are way past thoughts and prayers. Every elected leader at every level of government has a choice to take action, to address hate in our country, and to end this senseless bloodshed. The NRA and their supporters have prevented the advance of gun safety legislation in Washington and here in Connecticut. And so we say today, how many more lives and families will be shattered until we say enough? And we're very proud of the progress we've made in Connecticut, but there is more to do right here at the Capitol, and there is more to do, much more to do, in Washington, D.C., and it is my pleasure to introduce one of the leaders in our national fight against gun violence, Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Thank you. Thank you to Susan and the governor, my congressional colleagues, John Larson, my partner in this effort in the United States Senate, Chris Murphy, all of our delegation, all of our state legislative leaders and Attorney General and Secretary of the State. You make me proud to be back in Connecticut, again, at the forefront of this effort against gun violence. We are here to talk, but we've run out of words. There is no way, there are no words to describe the pain and grief that we feel at this moment for fellow Americans in El Paso and Dayton and Gilroy, but also fellow Americans on the streets of Hartford, in Bridgeport and Waterbury, in every community around Connecticut, because our children, our mothers who may be victims of domestic violence, suicides, it isn't only the mass shooting. It is every day, everywhere around America. And so even as we mourn and grieve the lives lost in those mass shootings, let us always remember the children, the moms, and families who are at risk every day from this senseless, needless gun violence. And I want to thank the groups that make me so proud to be from Connecticut, Connecticut Against Gun Violence, Moms Demand Action, Every Town for Gun Safety, Newtown Action Alliance, Sandy Hook Promise, and the groups that are forming right now in the wake of these tragedies. America is on the move against gun violence, and we are breaking the vice-like grip of the gun lobby on our Congress, and we need to keep up this fight. We are winning. You are making a difference. Gun violence was on the ballot last election, and gun violence prevention won. And make no mistake, to my colleagues in the United States Congress, gun violence prevention will be on the ballot again next November in 2020. And if you are on the wrong side of this issue, you are going down. You will be given your walking papers if you are on the wrong side of this issue. And to my colleague, Mitch McConnell, Senator McConnell, lead or get out of the way. Call us back today to the nation's capital. You know, we're in the middle of a 5-week recess. 5 weeks away, 5 weeks time off. Now is the time for action, not to be away or time off. Mitch McConnell, call us back to a special session to meet this national emergency, and do it today, because we need action. Now, there are a lot of good proposals, and the best place to look for the best proposals is right here in Connecticut, because our legislature, with the help of these grassroots groups, has championed and passed the best and strongest gun violence prevention laws in the United States of America. And I'm so proud. Thank you to our state legislature. Thank you to Governor Lamont, and thank you to Governor Malloy. So let's have a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Let's have universal background checks. Let's have a red flag or emergency risk protection order statute to take guns out of the hands of people who are dangerous. The killer in Parkland all but put an ad in the newspaper saying he was going to kill people, but nobody could do anything about it. We need a red flag or emergency risk protection order statute in every state in the whole country. And as strong as our laws are, we are still vulnerable to the states with the weakest laws, because guns, guess what? Cross state boundaries. They have no respect for Connecticut's borders. And so we are at the mercy of the state with the weakest gun laws. We have a stake in this national battle, and Connecticut can be the model. So let me just say, finally, this domestic terrorism has to stop. The appeals that we see in some quarters, including the White House, despite the denunciation this morning from the president, a continued appeal will just provoke more violence and domestic terrorism. We need to call it what it is, domestic terrorism, and we need to take action against it. And so let us come together now Let us come together as we never have before as a nation. This ought to be bipartisan. There is no excuse for anyone, regardless of party, geography, to do anything but lead at this point. Mitch McConnell, it's up to you. You can call us back, or you can evade your responsibility. You can do your job so we can do our job. We should be back in Washington right now doing our job and passing gun violence prevention laws that will make America safer. Thank you so much for being here today, and we are going to continue this fight. Thank you.
Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to recognize our state partners, our Secretary of the State, Denise Merrill, Representative Robin Porter, Representative Jonathan Steinberg, and Representative Sean Scanlon, who have joined us. We thank them for their leadership. And with that, I'd like to introduce Congressman John Larson.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Senator, for your continuous fight in the United States Senate. You and Senator Murphy have been courageous. Governor Lamont, our constitutional officers, our members of the Connecticut General Assembly, as Senator Blumenthal has already underscored, you lead the way, and we're grateful for that. From the bottom of my heart, from my colleagues, Connecticut leads the way. And in the House of Representatives, we have passed universal background checks because of the efforts of everybody here who continue to come to Washington. Not only universal background checks, but we closed the Charleston loophole. And we passed the Women Against Violence Act. Violence Against Women Act, excuse me. We did this, and all three of those bills sit in the Senate chamber ready for a vote. A novel thing in America, in a democracy, that what we ask of our leaders is that they vote. Exactly. Exactly. And so we prevail upon Mitch McConnell. We prevail upon the President of the United States. If the Prime Minister of New Zealand can respond with a mass shooting and say that she will issue executive authority and create a ban on assault weapons, can the least thing that Donald Trump do is insist that Mitch McConnell come back and vote what's already on their table? Demand a vote. Demand a vote. I heard so many people say yesterday, and clearly all of us here feel the same way, with regard to our thoughts and our prayers and how awful this has been. But as Senator Blumenthal said, and so have many others, the time for words is over. In a democracy, we vote. There is no excuse not to vote. There is no rational reason why the Senate shouldn't reconvene and vote on legislation, whether you're for it or not. And if you believe that video games and mental health are the cause, well then where's your legislation to vote on it? Yeah. Where's your idea? Where's your plan? What have you put forward? Not a single thing. As the Lieutenant Governor said, the silence is deafening. America cannot stand for it any longer, and the media must join with us in this effort. You must hold them accountable. Every day that they don't vote, every day that there's an item before them in the United States Senate You have to call upon them to vote. That's what makes us the country that we are. Let's get out there and let's vote. Thank you for your support and help. God bless.
It's my pleasure to introduce our Attorney General, William Tong.
Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor, and thank you all for being here today. I want to join Senator Blumenthal in saying how proud I am to stand with all of you, but how ashamed I am and disheartened that we stand here together again. Last night, I had to rearrange my schedule, so my wife was in my daughter Eleanor's room. She's 13, Penelope is 11. They were cleaning up the room and putting away some children's books that they didn't need anymore. And so I went in and I said to Liz, I've got to get to Hartford in the morning, so unfortunately you need to drive Sasha to camp. He's my son, he's 8. And they could tell that something was wrong, that I had to get to Hartford to be here with all of you. And so Penelope, who's 11, asked, "What's wrong, Ba?" And so I explained, and I stopped for a second because I wondered if I should explain.
How do you explain?
How do you explain, right? You try to find the words to explain to your 11-year-old and your 13-year-old that 34 people were lost in El Paso and in Ohio to domestic terrorism, to hate. And Eleanor's response was, "Again?" That's the response of my 13-year-old. Again. My kids 13, 11, and 8 are the children of this crisis, like the children in Sandy Hook, and they are growing up in a world riven by hate and division and white nationalism and racism. And this is what happens. This is what happens when you impose a Muslim ban. This is what happens when you separate children from their families. This is the product of hate and cruelty. This is what happens when you declare a false national emergency to build a vanity project, a border wall that the United States Congress has said you shall not build. This is what happens when you call immigrants, people like my parents, vermin, animals. You say they're coming here as an invasion, an infestation. This is what happens when you give comfort to racism and hate and violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. And this is what happens when you tell 4 members of the United States House of Representatives to go back to where you came from. And when we heard about roundups and mass arrests by ICE and mass deportations, this is what we were afraid of. And so I'm standing here with activists who together over the years, we passed the post-Sandy Hook reforms, the strongest gun laws in the nation. We passed the domestic violence gun law. We banned ghost guns and bump stocks. We honored a young man, Ethan Song, by a passage of his law to strengthen our safe storage laws. But I think all of us know there is so much more work to be done, and we cannot do this alone. So I just want to say to the President of the United States and remind him, you're the President of the United States. You are the leader of the free world still. You have enormous power in your office, enormous influence in Washington and across the country. Stop. Stop the hate and the division and the cruelty when somebody at one of your rallies, when you're talking about immigration, says, shoot them all, don't give them comfort. Call them out. Stop it. Step forward. Step forward and give meaning to what you've said in the last 12 hours. Get behind a comprehensive package of common sense gun reforms in this country. Use the tremendous power of your office to lean on the Republican members and the leadership in the United States Senate to act now or get out of the way, and let Senator Blumenthal and let Senator Murphy and let Congressman Larson do their jobs. Mr. President, if you love your children, if you love your grandchildren, and if you love our children, please let us do our jobs. Let Senator Murphy and Senator Blumenthal and the congressional delegation do their jobs and keep our families safe. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Luke Bronin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Bicewitz, Governor Lamont, Congressman Larson, Senator Blumenthal, Attorney General Tong, all of our elected officials, and most importantly, all of the groups that are standing here united, calling for common sense change that is long overdue. We're here today to stand in solidarity with the communities in Dayton and in El Paso, but we stand here in a city where too many people have lost their lives to gun violence year after year, summer after summer, including this one, where people like Reverend Henry Brown, who is here, and the Mothers United Against Violence, those mothers who have lost their children, week after week, have to sit with new mothers who join that group, the worst group you imagine being part of. The violence we see in cities like Hartford and Bridgeport and New Haven, it's of a different kind and of a different character than the mass shootings that have devastated cities elsewhere in the country this week, but it is no less devastating to our communities. And if you think that having too many guns isn't part of the problem, then you're not looking outside of the United States, because we're the only country where this happens. And as has been said, as proud as we are of Connecticut's laws, until the United States of America adopts common sense gun laws, illegal guns will continue to make their way to streets of Hartford and cities around Connecticut and every state in this country. The president today said that guns didn't pull the trigger. Mental illness and hatred pulled the trigger. Well, if the shooter in Dayton didn't have a military-style assault weapon with high-capacity magazines, that trigger couldn't have been pulled so many times in 30 seconds that so many lives were lost and so many people wounded. If it wasn't so easy to get your hands on an illegal gun here or in cities across the country, then fewer mothers would have to grieve the loss of their children. And if mental illness is a part of the problem, and mental illness sometimes is a part of the problem, then, Mr. President, start investing in treatment. But not only mental illness. Start investing in communities that have been devastated by generations of poverty and trauma and the addiction and all that comes with that. Instead of mocking cities like Baltimore, and he might just as easily have said Hartford, invest in those cities and invest in the children in those cities. And if you believe, Mr. President, that hatred pulled the trigger, then those who enable hatred pulled the trigger. And Mr. President, if you look in the mirror, you will see the hater in chief. Because from the very first day of his campaign, he called Mexicans rapists and criminals, and he laughed with those in the panhandle who joked about shooting illegal immigrants, and he said there are fine people on both sides of the issue in Charlottesville. And today, in the wake of the shooting in El Paso, he linked progress on gun safety to immigration reform, because he can't help but empower hatred every time he speaks. And finally, this isn't just about Donald Trump. I'm so proud of our congressional delegation. Senator Blumenthal, Senator Murphy, Congressman Larson, our entire delegation. But the Republicans who refuse to call out white terrorism and white supremacy for what it is, and the Republicans who refuse to condemn the hateful rhetoric that comes out of the mouth of the President of the United States, and the Republicans who refuse to call a vote on common sense measures that should have been adopted long ago, you're responsible too. And to those who are afraid to take on the NRA, it's time to recognize that Moms Demand Action now has more members than the NRA. And I tell you what, I bet they wouldn't mind my saying on their behalf to those Republicans who've been afraid to take action, if you have the guts to stand up to the NRA, they'll stand with you and support you all the way. But now's the time for courage. Now's the time for courage. Now's the time for action. Thank you to all of our leaders in Washington who are fighting. Thank you for everyone who's working hard. It's long past time to make the change we all know we need. Thank you.
We could not have made the progress that we have made here without my partner in government, Governor Ned Lamont.
Moms Demand Action has more members than the NRA. Man, that is long overdue. That is long overdue. And as Luke pointed out, you know, these are the tragedies that happen in our cities across the state and across the country, and we're brought here, catalyzed by the mass murders over the last 48 hours. And as Dick and John pointed out, Connecticut is a leader when it comes to gun safety laws. Connecticut stays a leader when it comes to gun safety laws. And we are leading, and we need Washington to follow. We need Washington to follow. Look what's happening. We have guns coming into our cities here. They come down from Maine. They come from New Hampshire. You look around. You look what happened in California where the assault weapons came over from Nevada. Look what Rahm Emanuel said. He was the then outgoing mayor of Chicago. And they said, Mayor, how come you have all this gun violence in Chicago and it's a lot less in even places like New York City? And Rahm Emanuel said, New York City has New Jersey and Connecticut next to them with their reasonable gun control laws. I have Wisconsin and Indiana, and look what that is doing to my city. And that's why we have to stand up. That's why we need the federal government to stand up. We can take the lead in Connecticut, but we can't do it alone. And we know it's about guns. We know it's about mental health. Here in the state, we're doing everything we can. We've got DEMAS and mental health working with DCF. Well, I talk to teachers and I talk to superintendents and principals across the state. They're not asking for, state troopers in the schools. They're asking for mental health professionals. They're asking for social workers. They're asking for people who help reach out and talk to these kids and bring them back. And that's what we're trying to do every day. We're trying to give these kids hope. We're trying to give young people that opportunity. We're investing these people. We're investing a couple $100 million over the next 5 years, going right at disconnected and disadvantaged kids. We owe it to them. We got to get in front. Project Longevity and other programs. Look what they're doing in Waterbury, the Police Athletic League, doing more to head this off. And Michael Moore, remember 20 years ago, bowling for Columbine, and he said, what is it? Look at Canada. Look at, they have fewer deaths by murder than, we do in a lot of our major cities, in the United States of America. And what can we do? Maybe it's something about social interaction. Maybe it's about us being together as a family. Maybe it's things we can do to look out for each other. But then he pointed out that those two young people that murdered in Columbine had gone bowling that morning. And they had some of those social support mechanisms. But what was available was guns. We have more guns, or almost as many guns in this country as we have people. It's guns in the street, guns that are readily available, guns that are making this so incredibly dangerous every day. And we're not going to let it stand. It's not going to stand on our watch. Connecticut's going to continue to take the lead. We're going to do it with Connecticut Against Gun Violence. We're going to do it against the mothers. We are right here fighting every day. And we're going to put pressure on Washington, D.C., as all the governors can, to make sure you guys have the chance to make a difference for us all. Thank you, everybody.
Governor, thank you so much. Sadly, in Connecticut, we know what it's like to deal with a mass shooting and the tragedy of the aftermath of that. But we have turned tragedy into action, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Poe Murray, Chair of Newtown Action Alliance.
I want to thank everyone here for electing the best representatives here in Connecticut that have worked so hard to pass the strongest gun laws in the nation. And we have worked for the past 7 years to pass federal legislation that follows Connecticut's lead. Our hearts are breaking once again, dramatically, for Dayton and El Paso and Gilroy and for Hartford every single day. In less than a week, 32 people were killed and 70 people were injured in 3 mass shooting tragedies perpetrated by gunmen who use assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in 3 communities in 3 different states in our nation. Enough. As of this morning, there have been 255 mass shooting incidents in America. And every day, over 100 people are killed by guns, and thousands more are killed every single year. We are devastated by these mass shooting incidents, but we are not shocked at all. For nearly 7 years after the Sandy Hook mass shooting, where my neighbor killed his mother in her own bed and then killed those beautiful children and our educators in our elementary school, we have warned all Americans, in particular elected politicians across the nation, that if a mass shooting can occur in Sandy Hook, then it can occur anywhere, and it has. We have implored the president, all members of Congress, governors, and state representatives throughout this nation to strengthen the state and federal gun laws to keep our families and our communities safe. Tragically, The president has failed to take action after many mass shooting incidents on his watch. Shame on him. His rhetoric, his racist rhetoric, has fueled these mass shooters. Yes. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has blocked all the gun violence prevention measures that have been presented to Congress in the 116 House of Representatives and Senate. And the background check bill has been passed by the House of Representatives. Thank you, Representative Larson and others. And the Senate is sitting on it. Senate Majority Leader is sitting on that bill. It is a Senate graveyard. And we need to do more. We need to ensure that the federal government follows suit, like California, Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York, and other states who have taken action to protect the families. And we must fight the NRA. And they are weak right now. Seven years ago, Newtown endured a day of terror similar to Dayton, El Paso, and Gilroy after a gunman used an AR-15 and high-capacity magazines. And I know that we can pass an assault weapons ban. 67% of Americans support it. We have traveled down to Washington, D.C. with Reverend Brown, Kristen Song, Fred Guttenberg from Parkland, and other families from all across the country demanding action. We will continue to travel down to D.C. We have endorsed the Denver Accord. Many of us, including Jeremy Stein from CAGV, we traveled to Denver on the Columbine anniversary, and we put together a set of policies and procedures and measures that will protect all American lives, and we will implore all presidential candidates and all elected officials to embrace the Denver Accord. And thank you to everyone for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much. I just wanted to acknowledge that Senator Saud Anwar and Representative Mike Winkler have joined us. I would now like to introduce a fierce advocate for gun safety, Jeremy Stein, Executive Director of Connecticut Against Gun Violence.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I am really proud to stand here to be a part of the greatest state in this country and the state that takes this seriously, the state of Connecticut. We lead the way, and we need to continue to lead the way. But let's make something very clear right now. The United States has a gun problem. No question. It is a gun problem. This is not just a mental health issue. This is not a problem with not having enough armed security or people armed. If that were true, El Paso, Texas would not have been the subject of a horrendous murder. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are armed in the state of Connecticut, and it did not make a single difference. What makes a difference is common sense gun legislation. We need to pass it, and pass it today. And this is not an immigration problem. The people that are committing these crimes are American citizens, and they are armed with AR-15s, high-capacity magazines. These things need to be banned today. This is unacceptable, and it's irresponsible if we don't make a change right now. But this is a fixable problem. In Connecticut, we passed 3 gun bills this past year, and almost every year we have been able to pass common sense gun laws, assault weapons bans, high-capacity magazine bans, permit-to-purchase laws, safe storage this past year. And we did it with an overwhelmingly bipartisan support this year. In fact, Only, I think, 2 senators voted against safe storage this year. This can be done in Congress with the right amount of courage. And I have 2 gentlemen to my right who have been leading the way, Senator Blumenthal and Representative Larson. Join them in saving lives, and do it today. We cannot wait any longer. And we need to use Connecticut as an example. We need to pass these laws around the country and in Congress, and if not in Congress, then we need to pass it state by state, because as we have heard by the Attorney General and by Senator Blumenthal and everyone else that spoke before me, we are only as safe as our neighboring states. So Connecticut is only as safe as Maine and New Hampshire. And as we saw from the El Paso shootings, California, with some of the strongest gun laws also, they're only as safe as Nevada. So we need to pass this on a national level, and we need to do it today. We cannot wait till 2020. The tragedy at Dayton, Ohio, and I want to repeat this because we cannot forget what happened, because what we're hearing in the news, all too often, we hear it and it's forgotten. The news cycle moves on, and we need to make sure that we remember these things. 9 people were killed in Dayton, Ohio, and at least 27 were wounded Sunday morning in the second mass shooting in our country in less than 24 hours, and the third in a week. A gunman was outfitted with body armor, a rifle, and multiple high-capacity magazines. This is all too common today. And these men we see in the news, they are there to destroy the fabric of our country. This has to change. And the murders in Ohio were less than a day from the killings in El Paso, where at least 20 people have been killed and 26 wounded inside a Walmart. And just the week before, 3 more people were killed in California at a festival where families were trying to take their children. And let us not avert our attention, as our mayor has said so eloquently, let us not avert our attention to what is happening right here in our own backyard. Connecticut has some of the strongest gun laws in our country. We must strengthen these laws and our enforcement of these laws to stop the 47 deaths that have occurred this year in the state of Connecticut. Common sense solutions will help to lower gun violence in our cities like Hartford and Bridgeport and New Haven. And I have Reverend Brown standing to my left. Can't tell you how many times. This is a man who, his job, when he is not here, his job is holding vigils for the dead, for the fallen, and many times these vigils are conducted where there is still blood on the ground from the shooting that happened the night before. We have to end this in our cities right now, today. And 17 hours before the California shooting, there was another festival that didn't get as much media attention. This was a shooting in Brownsville, New York, in Brooklyn, where 12 people were shot and 1 dead at this festival. And just yesterday, 8 people were shot and 1 person was killed in the west side of Chicago. This must be stopped. We need to concentrate on urban gun violence as well, and we need the help of the media to do that. So we will continue this fight. We will continue this fight. Everyone behind me, Connecticut Against Gun Violence, Newtown Action Alliance, Moms Demand Action, Giffords, Brady, we are here together to stop this. We need our legislators, and we need strong gun laws to work to save lives. And we need our neighboring states to do the same. And so we were asking everyone to call their senators, their congressmen, state and national, to request permits to purchase laws, licensing and registration, universal background checks, extreme risk protection orders, safe storage, and finally, a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And the last time I checked, we lived in a democracy. A democracy. And a democracy relies on voting.
Go get them.
Relies on voting. So we need to take a vote in Congress today. Because without a vote, then our country just becomes a dictatorship. So let our senators vote and let them vote today. Someone said last night that the gun debate was over a long time ago. When we failed to take action in Congress after Sandy Hook, when 20 children were killed, that was the end of the gun debate. Let's prove them wrong. Let's prove them wrong. Let's end this debate today. We can't wait until tomorrow. Our lives depend on it. Thank you very much.
Governor Lamont and I would like to thank all of our elected leaders for joining us. We also thank our partners, all of the grassroots leaders that have joined us today. We appreciate your being here. Let's go forward and act together to change our laws in Washington. Thank you so much for coming.